All right. Well, I am back with something a little extra for you this week. I thought, you know what? I really, really couldn't help myself. I was saying to myself as I sort of like replayed and rewound, as if I have a cassette player, my past podcast, and I was thinking to myself, that's not all I've got for you this week. And I want to give something more. And there's been something that's on my mind, and I was thinking to myself, Rami, why don't you just share this? And, because it's the primary thing that's on your mind. You spoke about a subject that, came up and thought about the week prior, and that's okay. It's great. It's still very, very valid. Practicing Mitfreud is amazing. But, what about, just talking about what's really, really on your mind? And it's not that I didn't mention it prior. It's just that I didn't make it a priority. And I should have made it a primary, and I didn't. But I'm changing that now. So this is really just about this idea of, back when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, Nintendo was around, and one of my favorite games, actually one of my cousin's favorite games in Millbrae here in the peninsula in the Bay Area, was playing Duck Hunt on Nintendo. And I couldn't help but think about, how many people feel like they are just sitting ducks, just waiting for something to happen in this macroeconomic climate. I know today was special in that, hey, you know what? Elections were taking place. Yesterday was the Powerball. And so there's just a lot of things sort of take people's minds away from things. And, I've mentioned that, the holidays obviously are coming up. Holiday parties are coming up. Quarterly prioritizations are coming up. There's a lot of things that are coming up that are just distractions. But I feel like there's something really, really pressing, and that is, the idea of, just sitting there like a duck with like a target on your back, just waiting for something to happen with this macroeconomic climate. Now, if you're waiting for like the winds to change in your favor, I strongly encourage you to think otherwise, because who wants to wait for the wind? Plenty enough of wind lately if you're here in the Bay. But, it's really about doing something about, where you are at today, irrespective of, whether there's something imminent happening to the labor force. Now, I mentioned, a lot of companies are doing some layoffs, and this is not some like clickbait to like make everyone, be afraid of these things that are happening. I actually, on the contrary, want you to take a look at this as an opportunity. At the same time, let's just recognize something here. If you're not getting pinched and there is a fear of getting pinched, the fear itself is worse than the pinch itself. And so, this idea of like, oh my God, what's going to come is probably more scary for people these days than those that it already came to. And I'm really just saying that, hey, you know what? If, you were laid off, you're probably less afraid right now, believe it or not, than those that are questioning whether or not it's going to happen to them. And this is not some boogeyman, some monster, some big bad wolf, coming to your doorstep. This is just, an opportunity for us to do something about it. If, we don't want to be sitting ducks. And I, for one, it ticks me off when I see, individuals, just the masses trying to ignore like a reality that is taking place at this moment in time. And, we don't necessarily need this sort of like reality to sort of do some of the things that I'm going to be suggesting in just a moment. And suggesting things to protect yourself, by the way. But we sort of like do need like a reality like this just to give us like a wake up call, a little bit of a shake up here on what we're doing with ourselves. And this is just more about asking yourself who you are today, who you want to be, who you want to become, what you may need to lose along the way in order for you to become that person, that 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. How many months is it going to take me to get there? How many years may it take me to actually get there? This is beyond just that. Reflection, of course, is a wonderful thing, but this is more of like, this is a sense of urgency. This is an action for bias. This is a call. This is a crying call for you to put yourself into some motion here and get things going for yourself before things get much tougher and rougher. And that would be the absolute last thing that I would want for you. I want you to be successful. I want you to be doing your best work. I want you to feel excited about the work that you do. I want you to wake up and feel enlivened, to ready to, just to embrace the day, not face the day, but embrace the day, things that are coming your way. How beautiful it is to actually feel motivated and feel secure and knowing with confidence that you're actually on the right path. That's precisely what I want for you. And I know that's precisely what I want, what it is that you want for yourself. I believe that. I truly do believe that. And I truly do believe at the same time that we're in a situation that just really calls and begs for our attention here, just to be able to market ourselves when and if that opportunity comes to fold and comes to fruition. And so if you are already laid off, or this is about to happen to me, Rami, it's imminent. I know it's coming, and I need to prepare for it. The first thing that I want you to do is, don't start, spraying and praying, looking for roles, and immediately reaching out your network for open opportunities. No, please don't do that. As much as it is so tempting to do so, please don't. Please don't. And the reason why I don't want you to do that is because you may not actually have your narrative in its right place. You may not have a compelling story that is personalized and quantified and really, again, compelling in nature for you to then present yourself as a quality candidate for a particular position. And I'm really just saying here that I want you to truly jot down, all of these things that have separated you. It could be your unfair advantage. I talk about a lot. If you haven't downloaded my ebook on my website, please do so. It's purely about, your unfair advantage. And yeah, I promise I don't spam. I'm not in it for that. I can promise you that much. But think about what distinguishes you from other people as you are applying for another position. That is the primary goal at the moment, because we need to build out a narrative for you that separates you from everybody else. This is before you actually choose to engage with your network. And again, here, if you've taken my program, if you've listened to this podcast for the last few years, you know that, reaching out to your network and asking for a job, for an opening, a yes or no sort of response is not really going to yield the outcome you're looking for. Here, the quest is for some information. And I really want you to imagine yourself like a maestro in front of an orchestra. And each person in that orchestra, as you are the maestro, holds an instrument. And that particular instrument, requires a certain level of craft. It requires a certain level of skill set. It requires a certain level of judgment of character on whether or not, hey, we're going to play this way, go that way, play to this tune, go down, go low. And in here, if we're going to engage without really studying the landscape of all of these players with these instruments, we're really, really losing out on a lot of possibilities here. And eventually, and I've seen this, by the way, we may land an opportunity almost, I'm not going to say immediately here, but let's just say we do land an opportunity in the very near term, the very short term. If we don't have a compelling story to share, typically we'll be on the lower side of the range when it comes to overall compensation. And that again is the last thing that I would want for you. So if we are preparing ourselves, if we're sharpening that axe before we go out and start chopping some trees, and here what I mean by that is, interviewing, actively engaging, experimenting with the interview, whatever that interview may be, whatever product or service, company, business, whatever it is that you are trying to engage for a particular role and convert. That prospect may be high, but your compensation may be on the low end. And that may be okay if you're desperate and you need something. And who am I, to judge you for that? You more than anybody else, after all. I'll never pretend that I know you better than you know yourself. But here, what I'm really just trying to encourage you is to seek out an alternative to just immediately engaging, with your immediate network here, or just going online and looking what's open. We don't want to get into that as a topic of conversation today, because really here the focus is just not to be like a sitting duck and not to be like a waiting duck at the same time. If you currently were laid off, or You feel like, oh my gosh, something is happening here. Now, as for those of you, that are like, if you're in a position where, it's like, this macroeconomic climate is daunting. It's scary. I'm really concerned. And look, let's not pretend here. I'm going to give it to you real. So many of us today are wondering what the heck is going to happen tomorrow. What's going to happen next week? Is my company going to follow suit? And by the way, with all of this like ruthless prioritization and moving around from one thing to another and ensuring that, hey, we've got all our ducks in a row, no pun intended for the title of this podcast on the working at, what's happening here is it's almost like it's as though there's like a setup for something. And by the way, this is purely based on, facts that you're seeing in the marketplace, the industry and the way it's actually headed. And partly it could be based on your own intuition. You're like, something doesn't seem right here. Rather than like moving forward with some of these initiatives that we've planned out for, rather than pushing towards those, we're actually taking a step back. We're consolidating, we're unifying, we're standardizing. All of these things, that may in fact be the right thing to do, of course, but it sort of like gives you, if it's giving you, let's just put it that way, if it's giving you a feeling of, some anxiousness over like, hey, you know what, if something happens, like, where do I go next? Where do I start? What do I actually do? Great. I'm actually happy that you're actually thinking about that, because it's very, very important for you to start building out what could potentially be, a transition plan for your next gig, for your next role. And the way to start doing that today in this present moment is to actually write down, almost as if, I've got to ask you to do this. Put yourself in a position where you're actually writing out what your role description is. If you were to write your role description today, write it out. What are you responsible for? What have you been doing? And then write it almost like in the third person, where you are requiring someone to take over your role. It's almost like you're interviewing for your own role, and you're writing that down. The requirements of the role, what it takes to be successful in this role, how to ensure that you're headed in the right direction, what signals you're looking to achieve, as if you are interviewing someone for your actual role. And that could serve as a canvas, at minimum, an anchor and a benchmark for you to really think about your marketability here. Based on what it is I've written down, is this compelling enough to where at minimum, I'm actually excited to talk to a recruiter or a hiring manager over this? Is it actually aligned to my long-term objectives and my aspirations? Do I actually have a goal? We get tired a lot. We get burned out a lot. And that's primarily because we actually don't have clarity over the direction that we're heading. We don't have clarity over the actual outcome that we're pursuing. And when we don't have that, when we don't actually have a compass to give us that direction, it's like, my gosh, our energy is so depleted because we just don't have, something to signal and say, you know what, we're heading in the direction that we set out for ourselves. The course that we set out for ourselves when we left that island. Yeah, we're actually heading in that right direction. There's some seagulls around, there's some, animals that you see inside. Hey, you know what? There's a sign of life here. We're heading in the right direction. And it's no different here as it relates to your career, because I swear, when you're looking around, what's going on, again here, it's not to inject any level of fear. I want to, and if anything, inject like, some level of urgency, more so than fear. Fear, I don't want to get into that. Fear is actually a product of hope. The only reason why we're afraid of something is because we actually hope for something else. Maybe that's something to ponder over on your drive to work today, or your drive home, or whenever you listen to this. But, I really want you to be in a position of control, of some level of certainty over where, your future may lie. What direction you may have to take because it was either voluntary or involuntary. And there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, you know what? This may be a healthy shake up and wake up call for your life to think about, hey, I wrote this role down, Rami. I wrote it in the third person. It's as if I'm interviewing for myself. It gives me a little bit of an anxiety here. That's okay. That's fine. I would never ask you to suppress that anxiety. Recognize it for what it is. And if it's a healthy stress, great. How can you make things better? Remember, present is so much more powerful than past. So if you get this right in the present moment, you actually have some way to skew, to reframe, to readjust, to realign yourself towards an opportunity and a goal here in this case, where your role is so much more marketable if and when, something were to happen in an adverse way. And if it doesn't happen in that way, I think this is still a great opportunity for you to think about, like, hey, who am I surrounding myself with? What am I actually learning? Am I actually learning something here? Am I in the proximity of people that are supporting me, rallying around me, people that would rally around me if I failed? They want to just cancel me. That happens just way too often these days. Would they actually recognize all of these great qualities and things that I've brought to the table over the years? And you know what? You may be in a position today where you're thinking about, hey, you know what? I've put in my time. I've been doing this for far too long, and I'm not learning, and I'm not getting to the place that I want to be. And I want to feel invigorated, and I want to feel enlivened, and I want to feel excited about where I'm going and what it is I'm doing. And so maybe this is a really great opportunity for you to start interviewing anyways. It's incredible, how every single thing has a silver lining, has an opportunity, has some opening, something, through the cracks in that door where there's just like a light, and you got to follow that light. And there's so many distractions today to take us away from that light, from that pure uniqueness that you actually bring to yourself, to the marketplace, to everything that you actually engage with. And sometimes that uniqueness may feel like it's reached a level of normalcy, like it's, some sort of like equilibrium has actually flattened it out. And all of a sudden you're blending, with the masses. No, absolutely not. This is something to refuse. You must demand more of yourself, to raise your standards to a level that is deserving of you and only deserving of you. And therefore, irrespective of what happens in today's economic climate, start preparing yourself. Start exercising that muscle of conversation, of creating a compelling narrative for yourself, so that, at minimum, no matter what's going to happen, at least you can mentally and emotionally say to yourself, I'm prepared. No matter what's going to happen, I may not be fully prepared, but emotionally, I'm prepared. And you know what? Whatever's going to come is going to come. Whatever it is that's going to happen is going to happen. And all you can do is all you can do. But you got to do it all. And if it's not you, then who? And if it's not now, then when? So with that said, thank you for investing your time with me. This is another episode, a bonus episode, I suppose. I guess that's what they call it when you put a couple episodes or more than one per week. That being said, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Please be safe. Take good care of yourselves and one another. And this is your host and coach, Rami Balut, signing off for another episode of The Working It. Bye for now.